Hello, I'm Vic Zikoor, your host for today. Last time I said I was your guest. Actually, I am your guest. I come to your homes, you watch me there, so consider me as a guest, and I hope I'm welcome there. This is the second program in a series of two programs that we're doing about Palestine and Gaza, but also in the first program we talked about the tragedy in Connecticut at the Sandy Hook Elementary School. Again, we want to repeat at the beginning of the year, we really feel so bad, and our hearts and prayers are for the families and the victims and the friends and everybody who's related. So we'd like to welcome again Fadi Saba. Fadi Saba is a Palestinian, American Palestinian actually, was born in Palestine, and he's a school teacher and very knowledgeable about the politics, and an activist actually, Palestinian activist in the U.S. He's a member of several organizations, and we're very happy to have him here. Also, we have with us Salem Aljuni. Salem is an economist. He's a consultant to the United Nations, knows a lot about Palestine and their economics, and we're really lucky to have those gentlemen here with us to share with us their experience and knowledge. Last week, we also talked about Palestine and about the United Nations resolution, a little bit about Gaza, and we'd like to start again this week by having Fadi give us a little briefing about what we talked about, especially the United Nations issues and Palestine.
Let me just make a correction. I was actually born a refugee in Libya.
Okay.
Which is a big, but that's a good segue because that's a very big part of why some people may not be so happy with the UN, not the UN vote, but President Abbas's move in order to create a state in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, as well as Gaza Strip. My father's from Lydda, which is where Tel Aviv Airport is located. Technically, that's supposed to be part of the 1947 partition plan, Palestine, but unfortunately, obviously, that will not be the case. And so my father's right to return seems like it's being diminished, and that's one very important aspect that some people are opposed to this. So there are several things, and I know earlier we talked about what statehood means. Now, this is statehood without an actual state. It's a state that's now legally under occupation. Before it was a nation under occupation, a territory under occupation. Now it's a state under an illegal occupation. It has a defined borders, whereas Israel, the occupying power, does not have defined borders. So that's something to consider. And in the West Bank, you have half a million illegal Israeli settlers residing. They live in brand new, sprawling settlements, hilltop settlements, land that was stolen from Palestinians, including some of the main aquifer areas where inside Israel proper, the water aquifers are not as good as actually in the West Bank. That's where most of the water is. And so taking that and making sure that they have it under their control is an extremely important part of what Israel is doing. Now, President Abbas in his speech to the UN talked about water rights, talked about space rights, talked about sea rights, Israelis, Palestinians in the Gaza Strip being able to go as far as they can to fish. Now, what will come of it is unknown. It depends on whether the Palestinian National Authority is willing to actually say to actually do what they say they want to do, which is join the International Criminal Court, join other UN institutions that will essentially force Israel to abide by law. Now, Israel and the United States are tightening the screws on the Palestinians, including withholding hundreds of millions of dollars that are actually Palestinian tax money that are funneled through Israel. It's a complex system through the Oslo Agreement. So those funds would go to the Palestinians because they're the ones who paid for it, right? It's been collected to pay for the workers, to pay for road improvements and the like. And without salaries, there's obviously discontent and
So let me
causes
clarify
problems.
two things from what you just said. First of all, you said Israel has no boundaries.
It does not have defined boundaries, no.
So
It
what
refuses
does
to
that
define.
mean? Means it keep on expanding the way it wants, or?
Well, there have been coins, Israeli coins, currency coins, which showed Eretz Israel, Greater Israel, from the Nile to the Euphrates. Obviously, that's not where they're at, but they never had defined boundaries. They don't want to define theirs, partly because some feel that if they can expand, they will expand, and they did. They took over the entire Sinai Peninsula until they were forced to retreat. And the U.S. paid them money to retreat. They occupied the Golan Heights, which is Syrian territory, and of course the rest of occupied Palestine.
Yeah. And the second point is about the taxes that Israel collects. You said they are from Palestinian laborers and whatever. And so I didn't know that actually. So that taxes, then they pay it back to the Palestinian Authority. Now they're withholding that, right?
The way it works under the Oslo process, which is the Israelis designed cleverly from their point of view to give them maximum control of any Palestinian authority, any Palestinian political entity that might emerge, is that they collect the value-added tax and the income in the import duties on goods coming into the Palestinian territory. Palestinians do not control their own external borders, nor their internal borders for that matter. So goods coming, let's say, from apples coming from the United States, let's say, destined to the Palestinian market, will pass through an Israeli port. The Israelis then keep track, presumably, of what was purchased by a Palestinian merchant, takes that information, collects the import tax from that merchant, the value-added tax and the customs duties from that merchant, and then transfers this to the Palestinian Authority in a clearance procedure each month. And it's currently the average monthly transfers are about $100 million, 100 million US dollars. Those transfers constitute about 2/3 of all revenues to the Palestinian Authority. So what Israel collects on behalf of the Palestinian Authority is about 67% of the total revenues that the Palestinian Authority has to work with in a given year. On average, it's average about 2/3. The rest is collected by the Palestinian Authority internally on value-added tax on domestically consumed goods, and also there's some income taxes, which are an increasing component. And there's also fees. Somebody wants to start a business, somebody wants to build a home, they have to pay fees to various authorities. So, but the bulk of what the Palestinian Authority has in terms of revenues is actually controlled by Israel, or can be controlled by Israel, and they have stopped payment, which they are not allowed to do under the Oslo Accords. They have stopped payment at several points in the last decade, in the last actually going back to '96. Actually, I think was the first time that they stopped it. They also stopped it in 2002. 2001 at the beginning of the second Intifada, and they've also stopped it in 2006 after Hamas won the parliamentary elections in the West Bank and Gaza. They stopped it then. And what the Palestinian Authority has done in those circumstances was found bridge loans and assistance from other places to sort of bridge the gap until these kinks were worked out.
Yeah.
And so these crews, withholding $100 million a month, which is extremely important, obviously, to pay salaries, and people can't live without. It is extremely expensive for Palestinians to live because they have Israeli prices at salaries that are not even half the salaries.
It's very expensive. I mean, West Bank and Gaza are relatively very expensive places to live, and it's because there's that imported price. Most of what the Palestinians import is from Israel. Israel is a relatively high-wage, high-price country.
So when they import from Israel, do they have to pay taxes on it?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, actually, anybody who imports from Israel, they're going to pay taxes on
To
it.
the Israelis.
Yes, but then the Israelis are supposed to transfer it and vice versa. If there's anything exported from the Palestinian side to the Israelis, the Palestinians are supposed to hold the taxes and transfer those to the Israelis. But there's much more imports, much more. I mean,
But let me understand. You're saying that the Palestinians collect export taxes from goods that goes to Israel.
Yes.
And then they have to pay it back to Israel?
To Israel, yeah.
No, so as they tighten these screws, it essentially would tell the PLO, the Palestinian National Authority, well, maybe I shouldn't rock the boat. Maybe I shouldn't join the International Criminal Court. And by doing so, then actually take cases against the State of Israel and the Israeli occupation and so on. So that is one thing. It's an economic control. And the U.S., of course, is quite supportive of Israel in these things. They're not upholding the Oslo Accords, which were signed here in Washington at the White House lawn.
And the U.S. has never been, and probably never will be, an honest broker in all of this. It's definitely, on the side of Israel. And
but I don't think we should say never. Things could change.
Yeah. But I'm saying in the foreseeable future, I can't imagine that the U.S. would be an honest broker. And I don't think the problem of the Palestinian Authority, one of the problems, is that it has sought
the U.S.
It has sought the U.S. as a broker, rather than using other means of struggle. And in a way, the Oslo process very clearly has straitjacketed Palestinians and their ability to maneuver politically, because they've sort of accepted this process, which is a lopsided process. Everything in the accords, as we just mentioned with regard to tax clearances, is basically gives Israel the upper hand. It gives Israel the outer envelope, border-wise, with regard to borders. It gives Israel the upper hand with regard to tax clearance revenues and transfers. And it does not challenge the Israeli control of water resources, of land resources, of the Palestinians, which are essential for developing the Palestinian economy. If you can imagine, how could the United States economy or any local economy develop without local authorities' control over the water resources of the territory and of the land resources and of their ability to move about within that territory,
especially
freely.
In an agrarian society like Palestinians. And in the past 10 years, I think 500,000 olive trees that are from the Roman times, hundreds of years old, have been uprooted by Israelis. 500,000, and of course the olive harvest is. The olive tree is like the symbol of Palestinian trees, and the olive harvest is the most important time of the year.
For Palestinian agriculture, that is
40% of the economy, I believe.
Well, no, of the agricultural economy, olives is probably something like that. Maybe a third or 40% of the agricultural economy.
Actually, this year there's a group of Palestinians who brought olive statues made from the olive trees from Palestine, and they go around the churches and everybody's loving them, I might probably... I tried to bring them on the show one day, and we haven't been lucky, but they do really great work on big, sculptures of the Nativity, of the Last Supper, of Jesus,
That's a traditional handicraft in the Bethlehem area. And so visitors to Bethlehem, that's the first thing that they see when they get there, is all those shops selling olive wood sculpted, trinkets and things.
So I want to switch into a very important subject to me, which is the settlements. And as they're still building settlements in Jerusalem when the United Nations passed, the statehood of, brought Palestine into the United Nations, let's put it that way. So, how do you feel about the settlements, number one? Number two, what can we do to help,
Maybe I could just start on this one. I mean, the settlement process started almost immediately after the occupation in 1967. The first settlements were in East Jerusalem. And they've continuously both established and expanded settlements for the last 40. It's going on 45 years. Yeah, it's been 45 years now. So as Fadi said, there's close to 500,000 Israeli settlers. Now they placed these settlements strategically. It's not just on mountaintops, but it's over water aquifers. In fact, there's almost if you look at the aquifers, the underground water resources of the West Bank, and look at the mapping of where settlements are, there's almost a one-to-one correspondence. They right over the water resources. So what the Israelis are saying in this whole process is, this land they consider their land. This water they consider their water. They consider Palestinians residents of this area, not citizens of this area. And what they're attempting to do in the Oslo process, and through the establishment of settlements, is basically to preempt the possibility of a real two-state solution. That is to say, another state as they see it between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. There's currently only one state in that region. It's the Israeli state. Palestinians live under this state under a system of military laws. There is a Palestinian Authority that nominally represents these people, but in fact does not wield effective control or does not wield the powers of a state, of a real state. It's an entity, something like a municipality here. And settlements are designed to preempt the possibility that that municipality would ever become a real state. The fact that about 61% of the Palestinian territory of the West Bank, right, 61%, is given to settlements, military bases, so-called nature reserves, and so-called areas for expansion of Israeli settlements, 61%, which is the so-called Area C, is an indication of what the Israelis have in mind. Basically, they want a Palestinian population that has no access to real resources, which means that they'd have no possibility of independent development, economic development, which means that they'll be dependent on this Israeli state. And the settlements are the physical embodiment of that wish.
Okay.
Now, from a Palestinian point of view, I've argued, in recent years, is what the Palestinians have to is struggle for the one state, the single state, where Jews and Arabs live as equals in the same state. And one way to do that might be to start demanding that Palestinians have the right to live in those settlements. Those settlements are Jewish only.
Right.
Similar to a white-only neighborhood of a previous area in the United States, or a white-only apartment building in
South Africa.
Or a South Africa situation. But also here in the United States. I mean, there were real estate companies and banks have redlined for areas forever where no Hispanics or no African Americans will be allowed to get a loan to buy a house in a particular area. This is something like that, but it's far more rigorous, and it's also it's ethnic discrimination. Basically, discrimination. Even this state, Palestinians live under this state that doesn't recognize them as full human beings. Now, the struggle is to change that.
It is total apartheid. I mean, this is more than just how it was in the U.S. I would venture beyond that. I mean, Palestinians who are Israeli citizens inside Israel proper, not in occupied West Bank or occupied East Jerusalem, are not able to purchase properties wherever. 92% or 97% of all properties, privately owned properties, can only be owned by Jews. Sure.
Question, how does it apply to the Palestinians, the 1948 Palestinians?
Exactly, they cannot purchase those properties.
They cannot.
So
not just the ones after the 67
No. This is 1948 Palestinians, exactly. So it is an apartheid
These
state.
are citizens of the state of Israel.
These are citizens of the state who vote for parliamentary elections.
Members of parliament.
Exactly. They are limited as to where they can expand, how they can expand, where can they grow. So it is an apartheid state.
So a member of the Knesset cannot buy a house property, is telling me?
In what's considered a Jewish area or a Jewish neighborhood or
Jewish
a Jewish
development.
town. Yeah,
Okay.
Jewish development.
Okay.
They cannot just purchase anywhere. It's only certain areas.
Yes.
In Palestinian villages and
Right.
cities like Nazareth. Now, if you go back to the West Bank, it's even worse, obviously. It's an occupation. It's a
Right.
military occupation. It's beyond that. And as Salem described, all the aquifers are essentially now under the control of Israel. Palestinians protest sometimes that they may have received less water than they should, which is about, I think, a fifth of what Israelis receive. It's minuscule.
Yeah, I mean, the Israelis are basically using 85% of
West Bank
water resources. About 85% is used exclusively either for settlements or pumped into Israel across the Green Line.
Yes, and so you have that, and then what Israel's trying to do is create Bantustans, little cantons where Palestinians can live. And this is the Alon plan from 1967-68 timeframe, which is Palestinians to control their little municipality, their little village, but nothing beyond that. So this way they would skirt the idea of expelling Palestinians, even though that's being thought about still. Yet they control all the resources. The Jordan Valley, which is fertile and very important for agriculture. The highlands, where aquifers exist. These are very important. So it is an economic apartheid.
Not to mention the vast tourist potential.
Yes.
Because Bethlehem and Jerusalem are important sites of pilgrimage for Christians and for Muslims, not to mention Jews. But these are very important. And I mean, I lived in Gaza for 5 years, and there used to be in the mid to late 90s busloads of Malaysian and Indian pilgrims, Muslim pilgrims, coming to Gaza to visit certain sites which are of importance to Muslim figures. This is just to give you some idea. I mean, the potential for tourism in a place like Jerusalem, and as you can see, I mean, the Israelis exploit it, greatly.
Right.
In all of their literature, come visit Israel. What's the picture you see? It's the Dome of the Rock, right? It's an important Muslim site.
I promised you last week that we're going to talk more about Gaza, right?
Yes.
So now, one thing about Gaza is, and you live there. After there were settlements, and they were forced to evacuate them. Just came to my mind, would this ever happen in the West Bank?
You had 6,000 Israeli settlers in the West Bank.
Right.
Sorry, in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
And they had a hell of a time trying to get rid of them.
Right.
These are 500,000.
500,000.
In the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, you have about 500,000.
Wow.
In the Gaza Strip, you had only 6,000 or 7,000 Israeli settlers.
No comparison.
It's not a comparison.
Okay, so let's talk about Gaza. What prompted Hamas throw rockets at Israel to start this war, or was it the case? I mean, I want us to learn about this.
I tried to follow this, and basically there was an unofficial ceasefire between the two sides. Then Israel obviously did their attacks here and there. Palestinians replied. Then they killed a Hamas leader.
Right.
And that's when more Palestinians started shooting more rockets towards Israeli villages.
The incident is killing the military leader that started, the Hamas to retaliate. Why did they kill that leader? I mean, he was a Palestinian official, right?
Well, he is a leader within the Hamas movement.
Right.
Yes.
Also, Hamas is considered, they are outlaws. They could do anything with.
As far as Israel is concerned.
Yes. So Haniya, they could shoot him the same way.
Yeah, but you have to see the attack, the most recent attack on Gaza, as something more than just an attack on Hamas. For the Israelis, from their point of view, attacking Gaza in light of a new government in Egypt was in a way a test of Egypt, of the Egyptian government. Would the Muslim Brothers, who are now the government in Egypt, would they serve as meaningful interlocutors between Israel and Hamas? Would they negotiate a ceasefire? And would they put the pressure on Hamas to abide by this? Yes, as it turns out, this was a test of whether or not the Muslim Brotherhood is going to play ball in the sort of Camp David arrangement that exists between Israel and Egypt, or had existed, prior to the assumption of power of the Muslim Brotherhood. And that's a very important dimension that people don't focus on. But that, from my point of view, that was the aim of this. In addition to trying to eliminate as much as possible longer range missiles, rockets that have been brought into Gaza by Hamas for purposes of self-defense.
I mean, I have a lot of more questions, and I only have a minute and a half left. A quick one, a quick answer. Iran supplying Hamas, is that something that is serious and or is it still going, or what's going on?
I don't know, but compared what Hamas has, what Palestinians have, anywhere compared to what Israel has is minuscule. It's nothing. Okay. They have the F-16s, they have the missiles, they have nuclear weapons. So.
Firecrackers, and they call this.
Well, I mean, Iran, of course, probably Iran supports Hamas. With I'm talking about not just with money, but also with arms and training. Right. That's probably the case.
And I've got just quick answers. What do you expect the Americans to do? Just quickly, I mean, maybe within 30 seconds.
Nothing.
Nothing. And what do you expect us to do as Arab Americans to help?
To organize as much as possible our community and to bring our narrative, to bring our side, our understanding of the situation to fellow Americans.
And join the BDS movement, the boycott, divest, and sanction movement against Israel. That's very important. In the occupation.org tells you a lot about that, and that's very important.
So anyways, hey, thank you, Salem Aljuni. Thank you, Fadi Saba. That was very informative, and we needed another half an hour, I think, but maybe we could do it some other time. So good night, everybody. And by the way, those programs are watched now. You can see them now on YouTube. So I'll give you more information next time about that. You can go to YouTube and the Arab American Cultural Center and watch this episode. In the next 2-3 weeks, we'll put it there. And a lot of other Arab American programs on TV. So thanks, everybody. And again, I appreciate you coming over.
Thank you.
Thank you.